Good morning. Well, this is not Fletcher Field and it's not a tent. It's not the tennis courts with a bullhorn in the rain, but we are together apart, and I am delighted to welcome you to the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy's first ever virtual commencement in our remarkable 87-year history. Despite the trials and tribulations of the second half of this semester and the turmoil all around us rendered by this pandemic, this is a joyous moment, not only for our graduating students, but also for their families and friends who have supported them through the whole process. To you parents, spouses, children, extended family, chosen family, and the most loyal of all friends, thank you. Students, please, wherever you are, raise yourselves from sofas, dining room chairs, mats, beach towels, bar stools and beanbags, and hug, text, wave to those who have supported you. Thank you, Fletcher family and friends. Aside from your families, there is nobody prouder of your accomplishments, small and large, than the fabulous Fletcher faculty. Our faculty, having pushed and probed you, tested and found you ready, send you out into this misshapen world as global leaders. All we ask of you is that you use the knowledge and skills acquired at Fletcher for the best of purposes. Heed the words of Philip Larkin. Life has a practice of living you if you don't live it. We are confident you will continue to live it to the full. Among the faculty, I'd like to give special recognition to extraordinary contributions. This year began under the able leadership of Dean ad interim Ian Johnstone, a scholar and a practitioner who represents the best of Fletcher in his thoughtfulness and decency. Dr. Stephen Block has led the faculty as academic dean with fairness and flexibility through these unusual times. And it is with deep, deep gratitude that we recognise for years of extraordinary service, research and teaching, Professors Andy Hess, Professor of Diplomacy Emeritus, and Professor Hurst Hannam, Professor of International Law Emeritus. The Registrar's Office, under the leadership of Registrar Mary Delatra, has worked very hard towards today, and in addition to his more conventional role as Executive Associate Dean, I'd like to thank the Executive Producer of today's celebration, Dean Jerry Sheehan. This is an important day for our extraordinary alumni community of more than 10,000 alums across 150 countries as they receive the class of 2020 into their midst. You will enrich our alumni network even further. Since its founding, the Fletcher School has always taken great pride in the accomplishments of its graduates who have shaped the course of international affairs. The opportunities they had to serve may not have existed were it not for the doors opened by Fletcher graduates before them, the fabled Fletcher network. Graduates, class of 2020, you now have the opportunity, responsibility and privilege to carry this Fletcher tradition forward. Our alumni greeting today comes from Jordan Fabianski, a 2010 graduate of the Masters of International Business, its inaugural class. He is, as the class of 2020 would say, the mouldiest of MIBs. Now leading Dahlberg Advisors, he has some wonderful words of wisdom about the value of Fletcher in turbulent times. We are here to principally honour the 2020 graduating class of the Fletcher School. They have succeeded in a rigorous course of study in international relations. Among the graduates today, there are 5 Masters of Arts in Transatlantic Affairs, 6 Masters of Laws in International Law, 12 Masters of Arts, 13 Masters of International Business, 109 Masters of Arts in Law and Diplomacy, and 1 Doctor of Philosophy. Earlier this year, 2 students completed the degree of Master of Arts in Transatlantic Affairs, 11 Masters of Laws in International Law, 42 Masters of Arts, 13 Masters of International Business, 57 Masters of Arts in Law and Diplomacy, and 6 Doctors of Philosophy. When the names scroll, I invite you to close your eyes and imagine Dean Sheehan reading out your names, his voice brimming with pride and his eyes twinkling with delight. Today is also the day where we honour with prizes achievements and contributions to our vibrant Fletcher community. Congratulations to all those recognised, and my heartfelt thanks for the ways you have enriched the school with your achievements and your presence. Initiated by Dean Ted Elliott in 1983, the Dean's Medal honours those who have served notably in the international arena. Therefore, as Dean of the Fletcher School, it is my distinct honour and privilege to present our highest honour to Amina Mohammed, a daughter, mother, grandmother, and since 2018 a chieftain and queen. She was appointed to her current role by Secretary-General Antonio Guterres in February 2017. Known, among other things, for shaping and shepherding the Sustainable Development Goals in the largest crowdsourcing exercise the world has ever known, she expanded the boundaries of diplomacy. Her passion for justice, especially for the rights of women and children, burns so brightly you can see it in her eyes. As a woman, an African woman, the aspirations of many are attached to her. But she doesn't bow and she doesn't bend in facing some of the world's harshest and most intractable challenges. Today she will offer us insight and inspiration, and I look forward to presenting the medal to Amina in person at UN headquarters in New York someday soon. Class of 2020, you are the COVID-19 class, but you will not be defined by the pandemic and its aftermath. You will be defined by your response to it. You graduate into a world in the midst of a shock, dislocating multiple systems. It will not be the only shock you face in the years to come. Other threats and threat intensifiers are hiding in plain sight. How we avoid, mitigate, manage and build greater resilience to the risks they pose will depend in part on the analytical capability, the emotional dexterity and the managerial agility of Fletcher students. You have already proven yourselves resilient. Now you will need to hone your resilient leadership skills. Perhaps the greatest leadership challenge you will face, no matter your career path, is the need to rebuild trust. Visible today in responses to the pandemic across this country and around the world are the consequences of the erosion of trust. It is a crisis of social trust, trust in science, in our institutions, in public authorities, in government at all levels, in business and finance, of the international system and alliances, and the media. It is not new. Trust eroded over years cannot be won back in a day, a year, or an election cycle, or a quarterly earnings report. Social trust means trusting in society, including the stranger, the outsider. At the global level, it means trusting in partners, experts, institutions and agencies there to support the common good. Social trust is ultimately about us. If we have trust in us, we will get through this together. We, the peoples, as the UN Charter says, will get through this together. It may feel at the moment as if we are in a doom loop. Nationally and internationally, weak institutions and poor governance lead to low levels of trust, which leads to poorer governance. Higher levels of social trust correlate with those countries and communities managing this crisis better than their peers. The cost of distrust is always measured in lives, always has been, but now it is in 24-hour news cycles from some of the most famous cities of the developed world. The philosopher Onara O'Neill urges us to focus on trustworthiness. As we find ourselves on the downward slope of a diminishing social trust, this is a good place to start. Trustworthiness means putting good people in the right jobs, in institutions that we hold to account. And day by day, law by law, regulation by regulation, agreement by agreement, institution by institution, from business to shareholders, from firms to stakeholders, from armed forces to the people they protect, we can find our way back to a world where trust is the sure ground on which we can build the international cooperation we need. Whatever path you take, this is your work. And now I'm pleased to introduce Liz Tarlow, Chair of the School's Board of Advisors, herself a holder of both a mould and a PhD from the Fletcher School.
Hello, everyone. I want to extend my warmest congratulations to you, the Fletcher class of 2020. I'm Liz Tarlow, chair of the Fletcher Board of Advisors. As board chair these past 3 years, I've looked forward to graduation every May, especially to that moment when diplomas are awarded and I have the privilege of congratulating every newly minted graduate in person. Today, of course, there'll be no in-person, sadly. This pernicious pandemic has turned Fletcher and the world upside down. Perhaps it's because the Fletcher campus has been closed amidst mayhem that I feel a special kinship with your class. 50 years ago this May, as I was completing my senior year in college, this country was in the midst of another crisis. President Nixon had announced the U.S. incursion into Cambodia after repeated promises of U.S. withdrawal from the fiercely controversial war in Indochina. And several days later, 4 anti-war student demonstrators at Kent State University were shot and killed by National Guardsmen. The Kent State tragedy became a watershed moment for an already divided country. Some universities suspended classes, other campuses shut down altogether, not reopening until the fall. This devastating spring of COVID-19 has been marked by a similar sense of chaos, disruption, deepening political and social divisiveness, and yes, a wartime mentality and death. And just as Vietnam was for the class of 1970, this pandemic will no doubt be a defining moment for your class. And what should be a joyous time in your lives, alas, is overshadowed by a cloud of uncertainty, if not anxiety, about the future. But, as Sun Tzu, the great Chinese general, military strategist, and philosopher wrote, in the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. As your backgrounds reveal, you are a talented and mission-driven class. Your compassion and your commitment to social justice have been evident in much that you've already accomplished. You chose to come to Fletcher, as so many of you said, to make the world a better place. Now, you're fortified with this extraordinary Fletcher education. You have the knowledge, you have the skills to find solutions to the most urgent and complex problems in a world that has clearly changed forever. You are positioned to be the very leaders needed most today. And you will make the world a better place. On behalf of my fellow advisors, I wish you all the best on your important journeys. And again, congratulations.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle Tomlinson and I'm a 2020 MALD candidate studying Development Economics and International Environment and Resource Policy. And I'd just like to say congratulations from here in sunny Kingston, Jamaica. We've worked so hard to get to this point and I'm so proud of all of us for making it here. Can't wait to see you all again and I miss you terribly, so make sure I see you all at DITBall 2025.
Happy graduation, my friends. As you may recall from my run for the exalted position of Toastmaster, this is the only thing that I have ever really wanted. And with that in mind, I wrote this speech a year ago, but I haven't really looked it over, so I hope it stands the test of time, though I guess some of it may not translate. Here we go. It is great to see all of you here in Blakely Courtyard. For me, the best part of graduation is getting to meet everyone's loved ones and family before we all go out into the world. Traveling, facilitating the exchange of ideas, seeing different places, seeing people. Anyway, at least we'll always be the School of Diplomacy, Masters of Arts in Law and Diplomacy and Business for Social Impact, and United States. Sounds useful. Those diplomacy skills in particular, anyone from Fletcher can tell you we have the suavest and best social skills around. Communication, so key, guys. I will say, it is a shame so many of us will never get the chance to visit what's on the other side of that road next to the Hall of Flags. I know a fair few of the graduating class were waiting for the spring of 2020 on that one. At least we got to see it during our tennis court graduation. In all seriousness, there are things we're gonna miss. Like, I am so sorry we didn't do Naked Follies this year, but remember, there's always the listserv and we've got all summer. And we're missing the opportunity to do that thing in the spring term where you tell everyone how you really feel about them. That pointless courage of telling people you'll never see again that you've loved them for 6 months. I'll be waiting for your voice memo. The most important fact I've learned at Fletcher came from Kelsey. Kelsey Olick. MIB Kelsey? You know the one. And here it is. The cleanest bathroom in a public restroom is the stall closest to the door. I have no verification of the fact, but it feels right, which, to be fair, is not how Fletcher has taught me how to make decisions. I'll leave you with some lessons from this semester. From Professor Khan, we've learned that we don't know how things will turn out. We've also learned you should never be backlit on Zoom. Both of these are very important in these current times. So good luck, Fletcher. I've loved you. Truly, I have. Take it away, Ray.
Thank you, Ella, for that great toast. And thank you, class of 2020, for giving me this opportunity. This is almost more pressure than when Professor Jock cold calls you. But really, let's open up the conversation. The Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where all diplomacy goes out the door when free food is at stake, or when an undergrad walks into the library, where we take our costume competitions a little bit too serious, more some than others, and where by the end of your education, free pizza begins to trigger you. We are the crazies who decided to study international relations in Boston instead of DC, and we are all the better for it because of one word: community. As a school of international relations, the very essence of our school is humanitarian in nature. The very foundation of our institution is the preparation of leaders who work in service of others. Ever since COVID-19 forced us to leave campus and go virtual, we have come to rely on each other and pull together in this time of uncertainty and loss. Be it providing hundreds of N95 masks to hospitals, countless hours of volunteer work, companionship on long social distancing walks, or the leadership demonstrated by the Fletcher faculty and staff. It is undeniable that Fletcher has risen to the challenge. Never have I been prouder to be part of this Fletcher community. Today, we look across this virtual crowd gathered from every part of the world. We see people who 2 years ago were strangers, but today are dear friends and mentors we will cherish for the rest of our lives. Fletcher will always be part of our stories. We each have left a little bit of ourselves at Fletcher, and we each carry a bit of Fletcher with us wherever we go. Although this is not how we imagined the end of our academic year, it has proven that the Fletcher community is strong, resilient, and truly global. Here's to Fletcher, here's to the Fletcher staff, and here's to my fellow students, bottoms up. Now, no more of this sloppy nonsense. Carla, you're on next.
Thank you, Ray. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. To be completely honest, when I first heard about the cancellation of in-person graduation, I was disappointed. Those weeks in March seemed like a cascade of bad news, anxiety, but you don't need me to tell you all this. Yes, we cannot deny that this is not what we wanted. Yet, the surreal of this situation has made us stronger, not only as individuals, but as members of the Fletcher gang. Once this is over, we will look back at our last semester here and not only be happy about what we learned and who we became, but also about how strong, patient, and resilient we were. Once this is over, hopefully May 2021, we will see each other again, laugh, hug, dance, party, and celebrate. For all our friends and family watching this from other countries and time zones, please know that we are happy, that we're okay, and that we're grateful for all your love and support. Please know that this was worth it. Rest assured that the Fletcher class of 2020 will be the one who will never be dissuaded by the threat of distance and uncertainty. We will be the ones who, because of the shock of sudden goodbyes, will always have space in our hearts for the good memories and the amazing friendships. Things out of our control will happen all the time, but we can choose our responses, obsessing about what we cannot change or moving on and learning how to smile again. Now, let's pretend we're not stuck in Medford, Massachusetts, drinking tequila from a champagne cup before noon, and let's toast to us. May we find happiness, love, and a job. Cheers. Hit it, Manabeth.
Thank you, Carla. Greetings to everyone gathered here today on this memorable occasion. I would like to thank those of you who voted me in as a Toastmaster. While I'm very grateful, I certainly would be remiss if I did not point out that any of you could wax eloquent about this place that we know and love, the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. A place of dreams and aspirations, of free food and fiesta nights, of bustling hallways and silent study spaces, of office hours and the slightly more popular happy hours, but perhaps most importantly, a place of kindness. And it is this kindness which will stand the class of 2020 in good stead. I believe that the student body is strictly divided into two groups, the ones who could wake up in time for rule of force, and those of us who could not. However, both groups have something in common. It is the simple feeling of gratitude. Gratitude to our professors, gratitude to our dean, gratitude to our administrative staff, gratitude to every member of the Fletcher community, past and present, but perhaps most importantly, gratitude to the lifelong friendships that we have forged along the way. For many of us, the decision to come to Fletcher was a step into the unknown. A lot has happened since then. We are older, wiser, and in some cases exhibit higher levels of caffeine tolerance. While the crisis that awaits us outside the proverbial Fletcher bubble has not made things any easier, the last few months have made one thing very clear. We are ready and we are prepared. And one day in the distant future, when all of us have figured out what Fletcher currency actually means, we will look back at this day quite fondly. Thank you. And cheers to the class of 2020.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hello everyone, this is Michalis Stamatis from Washington, D.C. I'm a Greek career diplomat and I was given the opportunity to study at Fletcher through the Andreas David Scholarship. Studying at Fletcher is a truly unique, rewarding and life-changing experience. I feel extremely grateful and excited to have become part of the Fletcher family, and I'm looking forward to meeting again all my Fletcher friends. Until then, stay safe.
Greetings, Fletcherites, members of the board, faculty, families and friends, and congratulations to the 2020 graduating class. It's an honor to participate in your class day celebration, and just wish I could be there in person. Needless to say, our awkward distance on this class day is another sign that we live in turbulent times, and no one is untouched by the effects of the global challenges that we face today. I'm with you in spirit, however, out under the graduation tent near Blakely Hall, in the same spot where they pitched my graduation tent, in the same spot where we sat in those get-to-know-you circles with new students during orientation. I remember feeling when I arrived at Fletcher that I'd found my place and found my people. Fletcher seemed to mirror what I was passionate about, even before I arrived. Some while after I'd been admitted as a MALD student, and before arriving on campus, the school called and introduced a new degree program that might more directly echo my interests. And by the end of that call, I was delighted to join the inaugural class of International Business, or MIB, candidates, who would soon be the subject of some terrific debates on the social list. I was probably overenthusiastic when I arrived at Fletcher. I was drawn to the blurry lines between public, private, and nonprofit, the idea that private capital and market-based approaches could help to build a more inclusive and sustainable world, and I saw Fletcher as a stepping stone to joining a social enterprise, mission-driven organization, or some other endeavor to create shared value, not just shareholder value. Then reality hit. It was September in my first semester of 2008, and the global financial system all but collapsed. Prospects for landing that dream opportunity after graduation seemed dim. Time started to fly by, faster perhaps because of the specter of having to find a job in the wake of a recession. So I asked myself, would I need to temper my expectations? Would I need to find myself in some place I didn't want to be in 10 years? Could I get back on track? And I'm sure many of you are undoubtedly grappling with these same sorts of questions even as I speak. But rest assured, you have been preparing for this moment, and I can honestly say that as intimidating as it was to sit where you are now, Fletcher helped us to build muscles that are fit for these sorts of times. It's the 10-year anniversary of my class day, and I, like many others in my graduating class and the broader alumni network, could not have hoped for greater opportunities for impact, professional growth, and personal fulfillment than ones that Fletcher helped to unlock. To name just a few over the last 10 years, on the career front, just a year after graduation, I was finally able to jump aboard a social enterprise that I believed in, with thanks, of course, to the Fletcher alum who flagged my application, interviewed me, and understood what candidates from Fletcher are all about. I worked in an environment that offered a lot of feedback, and I grew quickly. But feedback aside, and my own efforts to take my career into my own hands, equally important was working with good people and building reliable teams. As my teams and businesses have multiplied in size, I've had the pleasure to hire a number of Fletcherites over the years, and can point to the ways each of them has been instrumental in extending our impact and in contributing to global development as a leader. On the personal front, my wife is also a proud Fletcherite, and we like to imagine the ways that we will manipulate our 2 kids into someday pursuing a Fletcher education. And of course, we stay in close touch with so many friends all around the world who we met at Fletcher or through the Fletcher Alumni Network. So all in all, with hindsight, I'm thankful to Fletcher for giving me an edge. And I'll share with you some of the advantages that I think Fletcher gives us, which I trust will open doors for you as well in the years ahead. The first is this: we release our agenda. We are present, open, we appreciate the essence of firsthand experience, and we are free from prior ways of thinking. This is a useful superpower in the social problem-solving industry, where success is really all about seeing the whole elephant, and where it's especially essential to receive feedback with a pragmatic rather than defensive view of your own learning and growth. As the poet David Ignato once wrote, reminding himself, "I should be content to look at the mountain for what it is, and not as a comment on my life." Having grown comfortable hearing and adopting so many different perspectives, we are better able to suspend our own, forget ourselves for a moment, and look at the mountain for what it is. Practically speaking, I've case interviewed hundreds of sharp candidates over the years, and it's those from Fletcher who are more allergic to force-fitting some blocky framework or diagnostic tool, who are quicker to pivot from one angle to another, and who are more graceful in dialogue and receiving feedback. Number 2, we know how to hold the picture on the puzzle box. So what does that mean? Now more than ever, solving the world's most pressing problems requires the kinds of systems change that comes only through collective action. It will take warriors leading revolutionary change, protesting on the street, enlightened insiders pushing internal reforms. It will take missionaries, innovators, entrepreneurs. It will take stewards to fortify positive changes at scale. But critically, it will take all of these types of actors working together coherently. So where's Fletcher? My sense is we are the glue, the intermediaries for impact, the visionary diplomats who bring the other disparate changemakers and their puzzle pieces together so that 1 + 1 can equal 3. Fletcher prepares us to be a force multiplier and not to drive impact alone. And that's not to throw shade on any other role or type of changemaker. Among so many other things, the world just needs a lot of glue. And in this regard, we have a comparative advantage. Finally, of course, we have the advantage of each other, the Fletcher community, cheering us on and challenging us to assume that we have a bit more agency than we ever think. Over the past 10 years, I found that assessing just how much agency that I have at any given time has been the greatest challenge that I've faced, and my greatest underlying source of anxiety. I think we need reminding that when the challenges we were responsible for last year seem small compared to the challenges that we're responsible for now, that's often a sign that we're growing. And we need to remind each other that our anxieties are in our heads, to remind each other to keep our chins up and to keep a sense of humor. I think when I look at the Fletcher flag, that the reason that lowercase letter F had the audacity to try and connect those 2 tectonic plates of orange is because it had a crowd of Fletcher friends and family cheering it on. So with that, here's to you, class of 2020. Today we're cheering you on. You're ready, you got this. Get out there, wash your hands, and Godspeed.
Hello everyone. I hope this message finds you safe and sound wherever you are. My name is Nicholas, and I am honored and humbled to be speaking to you today. First, congratulations to my fellow graduates, and sincere gratitude to all of you who've helped us reach this point. If you had told me 2 years or even 2 months ago that this experience would end with me making a Fletcher Commencement edition of the Queen's Christmas address, sporting a homemade haircut and using my bedroom as a recording studio, I would have guessed you'd been overserved at social hour, or maybe concussed by a crowd surfer at the latest Los Flecheros concert. But despite all disbelief, here we are, doing our best to stick together, although we have to be apart. If you've been feeling as I have, you might be struggling to contain multitudes of competing and contradictory emotional states all at once. Any given day brings confusion about what's going on, anxiety about the future, grief for the lives and livelihoods that have been lost, sadness for what could have been but no longer can be, and outrage over what should be done but hasn't been. This takes place above the undercurrents of unremarkable routine and the morbid relief that reminds us unhelpfully, well, it could always be worse. But there's also a sense of determination and the hope that things will get better, if not soon, then eventually, alongside abiding admiration and appreciation for those who help, who take risks to take care of others. In trying to sort through all this discordance echoing between gratitude and grievance, I kept coming back to 3 practices that help me stay grounded, and I offer them to you today in the hopes that you might find them helpful too. They are imagination, empathy, and joy. Joy in the face of crisis or tragedy is a radical act, but one that can sustain us in situations that might otherwise extinguish our spirits. Like humor at a funeral, dancing at a demonstration, or singing in the lifeboats, joy is often most necessary in the very moments in which it seems entirely out of place. However, I find there's often a pressure to forebode our joy, to treat it like a scarce and finite resource that should be rationed, or something inappropriate to allow ourselves when suffering continues within and around us. I find, though, that foreboding joy doesn't actually mitigate or forestall suffering. It simply cedes it more ground to occupy in our lives. And so I would propose on a day like today that we create some safe harbor for joyful celebration, however strange that might seem, and in doing so, remind ourselves that joy can travel far and be resilient, but it doesn't fare well in isolation, as I suspect we're all already acutely aware. Rather, it is in community and belonging that we can multiply joy and divide suffering. Forging community through bonds that bridge difference and now distance requires empathy, the ability to identify with others that we perceive to be unlike ourselves. Black feminists teach us that tolerance for the suffering of others is a direct function of a lack of empathy, stemming from privileged ignorance. In the countless case studies, conflict analyses, and evaluations that a Fletcher education entails, we've seen for ourselves how the harmful effects of crisis erupt along established fault lines in our societies, making some more vulnerable than others. If we were on campus in Medford, we wouldn't have to look further than a few miles, or kilometers if you prefer, to find examples of these fault lines. For example, the discrepancy of 30 years in life expectancy between Brookline and Roxbury, or pandemic infection rates 7 times higher in Chelsea than in Cambridge. If we stifle our empathy and pretend these realities don't exist, we deny the suffering of others in ways that make us complicit in the reification of their oppression and exploitation. Instead, my hope for us is that we can cultivate and hone our empathy together, speaking in solidarity and acting with accountability. As we go about doing that, the words we choose and the people we cite matter, much as Black and Brown lives matter, queer and trans lives matter, and Muslim and Jewish lives matter, to name but a few. Above all, human rights and human dignity matter, but the work we do to make these statements self-evident, that matters too. That work is beyond what any of us can achieve on our own, and so as we cultivate empathy for one another, we should cultivate empathy for ourselves as well, finding self-compassion enough to say, I will do what I can with what I have, but inevitably, when it falls short, I will keep trying. That kind of empathy takes, in turn, imagination. In queer activism, there is a tradition of channeling imagination into reimagining futures, which I find to be the only antidote against inevitability. Accepting something as inevitable forfeits both our agency and our responsibility to effect change. When we aren't able to reimagine crises into opportunities, when we miss an opening for the cataclysm that creates it, we play a silent role in allowing disasters to go unnecessarily unmitigated. Instead, we should use our imagination to ask insistent questions, infused with empathy and inspired by joy. What would it take to live in a world in which we all belong? What would it take to get us there? If it doesn't exist, how can we create it? And as we do that, how do we ensure that no one gets left behind? We owe it to each other not to abandon our imagination and to succumb to despair or worse, to complacency. Doing so would discount the debt, sweat, and tears that we've all poured into this collective Fletcher endeavor of bettering ourselves so that we may better the world. We've all been told that it gets better, and also never to use the passive voice when writing a memo. But I think it gets better when we make it better, by using our empathy and our imagination to posit better as a destination towards which we can make progress, using the constellation of our shared joy as a guide when the going gets dark. I recognize this is far from a fitting end to our time together, but I maintain faith in our collective ability to make it a worthwhile start to something new. The seas may be rising, but so are we. The sky may be falling, but I say, let it shatter all our glass ceilings on its way down. Back to normal is impossible, so let's imagine a way forward together. And on that path, I wish you safety and strength every step of the way. And I'll be here if you need me. In fact, once it's safe to be in shared spaces again, you can probably find me right where you left me, back in Ginn Library. So don't be a stranger. In the meantime, stay well, congratulations, and thanks again. And now, over to Olivia.
Thank you, Nicholas, for your timely and powerful words. I feel lucky to share a virtual stage with you, and I'm privileged to count you as a friend and a colleague. Thank you all for granting me the honor of being one of your commencement speakers. I hope you enjoy my carefully staged bookshelf as much as I enjoyed putting it together. As an opinionated graduate student, a captive audience is a heady experience, and I want to use this time to discuss two themes, two challenges for graduates: certainty and cynicism. Certainty about our place in the world, about the best way forward for all of us, about our relationships with others, is comfortable. It reassures us that we know everything that we need to know, and that there's nothing left to learn. It's comfortable, but it's not productive. Let's do something much harder and more transformative. Confront the impulse to seek the comfort of certainty. Negotiate with it. Leave room to grow. This is important. All of you are going to have a hand in shaping the future. I mean, that's why you took out all those loans, right? So the future is in part dependent on your ability to be creative, to go beyond what you personally think, to listen to new voices, to shake up paradigms, and challenge the order of things. Do not wear your certainty like blinders and claim to see. Hunt for different perspectives. Question what you find. Turn things inside out. The world depends on it. Cynicism is an easy companion to certainty, a bad habit, a way to fend off disappointment. It's easy to wear, easy to turn to, as easy as looking outside at the rain in Medford in late April, scoffing, well, isn't that typical? It's easy to succumb to. You all spend every day battered by stories of conflict and hardship, theories to explain why the world is this way, and horror stories from every corner of the world. Some of us have even experienced conflict in the halls of this institution, in interactions with other students, professors, and school administration. It's no wonder that cynicism becomes a reflex. But here's the call out. None of you are actually cynics. You haven't fooled me. What kind of cynic would go to graduate school to learn about how to improve the international system? What kind of cynic would immerse themselves in learning about all this bad and how we might make it better? What kind of cynic works to make an institution better than how they found it? A cynic wouldn't bother to take this opportunity to grow, to be uncomfortable, to challenge norms. So rid yourself of this fake notion that you're actually a cynic. Stop laughing through your nose and muttering under your breath. Lean into your desire to create change, whether that looks like changing your local community or changing the world. Hold on to that spirit and don't let anyone dampen it, especially not yourself. After 2 years in these halls, I'm confident that I have found a good many of the people set to change the next decades. Your dedication, humor, and complexity have made Fletcher a home. Times are strange and the future is uncertain, but the people at this graduation have become some of my best friends, my future colleagues, the people I look up to, and the folks I'll watch on the news someday. Thank you for all that you have done and all that you are about to do. Thank you to the professors who have challenged us, opened doors, and listened. Thank you to the staff who run the whole thing, even and especially when we don't see it. Thank you to the families and found families who have supported every single graduate here today. And thank you particularly to my friends and family who have been by my side every step of the way. Class of 2020, I cannot wait to see what you will accomplish. Stay well wherever you may be, and thank you.
I'll always remember the bonds that we've forged over the last 2 years, but particularly over the last 2 months. This video will remind us that the Fletcher Mafia is truly global and how special it is to be the batch of 2020.
Hi everyone, it's Maria Elena and I would like to send all graduating students a big hug from Rome, Italy, and to leave you with a quote by my favorite artist, Bruce Springsteen. The great challenge of adulthood is holding on to your idealism after you lose your innocence. Bye!
I'm so delighted and honored to be here today. And by here, I of course mean in the packets arriving at your homes via the internet protocol that I have spent so much of my life studying. The first person I tried to teach about the internet was my grandmother, Sheila. She was a writer her whole life, but struggled in her 80s to figure out how to continue writing and publishing. So I made her a blog, blogginggrandma.com, and she slowly learned how to post on it such essays as, "Yes, I dare to eat a peach," and 86 in the city. But she never really understood how it worked, or even, I think, entirely believed that other people could see it. I once had dinner with her at my parents' apartment, and she was utterly astonished that I could load her email inbox on one of their computers. How did it get all the way over here from my computer, she wanted to know. Sheila died while I was in graduate school studying cybersecurity and internet policy. Even in the early 2000s, it was a relatively unusual thing to be studying, and it could take you in some strange directions. On more than one occasion, my graduate advisor suggested to me in absolute earnest that it might be helpful for me to spend some time playing World of Warcraft on one of his son's accounts so I could really understand how people developed and invested in anonymous online identities. Graduate school, as you all now know from firsthand experience, is a deeply serious endeavor. And for me, graduate school was largely about getting a handle on the protocols that underlie the internet. If you thought there was any chance that I wasn't going to use this as an opportunity to talk about how the internet works, then you've clearly never taken one of my classes. At its heart, the internet is a set of rules that we all agreed to for how to chop up and package and transport information. They're rules that were deliberately written to be flexible, so that they would work for a variety of different types of information, text, pictures, audio, video, and to handle multiple users and streams of information at once, so that instead of waiting for a family member to finish using the telephone before you could make a call, everyone in a household, or indeed a whole city, can be online simultaneously, their packets all intermingling on the network at the same time. Part of the challenge of trying to secure the internet is thinking about ways to restrict malicious online activity without interfering with that fundamental flexibility. And speaking of flexibility, I have been absolutely in awe of how calm, graceful, and tough all of you have been about the changing circumstances of your final semester at Fletcher, to say nothing of how kind you've been to your professors as we worked out the logistics of teaching on Zoom. I have drawn tremendous inspiration from watching all of you adapt, from your resilience, from the willingness of the students in my class on privacy in the digital age to join classes at all hours of the day and night in their respective time zones, to plan and execute multi-person in-class debates on Zoom, to engage in discussions about the ways that the world is changing around us and will need to be remade in the future. I've also been enormously inspired and supported by my colleagues at Fletcher on the staff and faculty, by how wonderful they've been about approaching this new challenge of shifting our classes online as a collective endeavor and an opportunity to try out new tools and approaches to teaching. Most of them do not study the internet, but have still been much braver than I when it comes to rethinking their virtual classrooms, in part because I myself am someone who really likes for things to go according to plan. In fact, one of the things I wrestled with in graduate school was figuring out how to do research that couldn't be planned all the way from beginning to end. In my third year, after I finished my general exams, I was trying to choose a dissertation topic and kept getting frustrated with my inability to figure out what I wanted to work on, and my advisor's insistence that I needed to spend more time thinking and reading and playing World of Warcraft before I decided. My father sent me an email during that period, telling me to do essentially all the same things as my advisor, minus the computer games, and saying, remember that you cannot lay the whole thing out in advance, exactly what you're going to read, write, and show. If you could do that, then the research wouldn't really be worth doing. Of course, some of the research I did in graduate school was just obviously worth doing, like the time I wrote a piece about a Russian cybercrime syndicate that distributed the CryptoLocker ransomware, and I was contacted by the writers of the television show The Good Wife, who were working on an episode about a ransomware attack, and wanted to learn more about how those schemes operated. Possibly the greatest accomplishment of my graduate career was the moment in that episode when a member of the law firm that's been attacked dials the ransomware helpline number flashing on their infected computer screens, and a man answers, "Thank you for calling the Trojan Lock Help Desk. We are currently busy helping other customers. Please have your routing number ready and you will be assisted in the order you called." Because that really does happen. Cybercrime requires a tremendous amount of both human and technical infrastructure, not just the encryption algorithms, the malware programs, but also the people who have to answer phones in case one of the attacker's unwitting victims can't figure out how to make a Bitcoin ransom payment. The kind of research I do is predicated on the idea that trying to make the internet more secure requires tackling both kinds of infrastructure. That cybersecurity is not just about science and technology, it is also about policy and people, precisely the things you have been studying at Fletcher. Now, no matter what you study, you may have second thoughts at moments. I remember very vividly my graduate school hooding ceremony, where the former astronaut Mike Massimino spoke. In addition to flying 2 missions to the Hubble telescope and completing 4 spacewalks, he was the first person to tweet from outer space and later played himself on The Big Bang Theory. And he spoke at my graduate school graduation about going for one of his first spacewalks and looking back at the Earth, seeing the curve of the planet, and thinking, people are not supposed to see this. This is too beautiful for human eyes. And there I was, sitting in the audience in these robes. I had just spent 5 years studying nothing but internet security, really committing to the idea that that was going to be what I worked on for the rest of my life. And I'm thinking, maybe I should have been an astronaut? But teaching graduate students, especially ones with as much professional experience and international perspective as all of you have, is its own kind of great privilege and challenge. I thought back to my advisor's suggestion that I spend some time with World of Warcraft this fall, when I took my Cyber in the Civil Sector class to see the movie War Games at the Brattle Theater in Harvard Square. War Games came out in 1983. It stars the young Matthew Broderick, who guesses the password for a server he thinks has a bunch of games on it, like computer chess. And then when he logs in, he chooses what he thinks is another, cooler-sounding game called Global Thermonuclear War. And actually, as so often happens, the server turns out to belong to the North American Aerospace Defense Command and be capable of launching nuclear weapons. I took my class because it was famously one of Ronald Reagan's favorite movies. He watched it at Camp David the summer it came out, and then asked the chairman of the Joint Chiefs whether the scenario in the film could really happen. And the movie subsequently shaped a whole generation of American policymakers' perspectives on the threats presented by computers, profoundly influencing the anti-hacking law passed in the United States in the 1980s, to the point that a clip from the film was actually screened during a congressional hearing. Watching it with many of you at the Brattle in November, my first time seeing it on a big screen, hearing you laugh at the computers and politics and hairstyles of the 1980s, it felt right to be showing it to a new generation of policymakers, no longer as an instructional video about the risks of emerging technologies, but instead as a lesson in the complicated and sometimes haphazard ways that policy gets made and people try to imagine and protect themselves from the future. I wish we were celebrating your graduation today together in person in Medford, but at the same time, I am deeply moved by the idea that as you're watching this video is being chopped up into millions of packets with little headers affixed to each one, determined by rules dreamt up just decades ago to route them through the air and across undersea cables and up to satellites and over telephone wires and via cellular towers to your homes all over the world, where they are being reassembled, put into the right order to stream onto your devices in Singapore, California, India, Somerville, Switzerland. It makes me feel like people are not supposed to be able to do this. This is too beautiful. It reminds me how fast the world can change and what an enormous impact a small set of well-crafted rules can have. It makes me excited at the prospect of all the things you will go on to do, all the new rules you will write, that will no doubt seem as utterly incomprehensible to me, as much like magic as the internet seemed to my grandmother. You may not know yet how to do that, and that's okay. If you could plan it all out in advance, then it wouldn't be worth doing. Congratulations, class of 2020. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Hi, I'm Tanya Smith, and I'm a 2020 MALD focusing on gender analysis and international studies and business for social impact. And I would just like to give the biggest shout out to the class of 2020. I'm sure none of us imagined that we would be graduating in the middle of a global pandemic, but yet here we are, we made it, and I can't wait to see what we go out into the world and achieve.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. It's such an honor to celebrate with you and congratulate you today. My thanks to Dean Rachel Kite for inviting me to speak with you. I hope all the Fletcher community, faculty, students, administrators, and your loved ones are keeping safe and well. We're living in really surreal times. This graduation is virtual because our lives have become virtual. We're living them online. The COVID-19 pandemic has stripped everything back to the bare essentials. And the new normal means finding ways to be together and to keep our spirits high. What matters today is honoring your hard work and accomplishments and marking an important milestone in your lives. Congratulations to each and every one of you. This is a proud day, and you've worked hard to get here. Every one of you has demonstrated commitment, energy, and resilience. Today, you join the distinguished ranks of the Fletcher School alumni, which includes heads of state, ministers, diplomats, United Nations Undersecretary Generals, and leaders in all areas of life, academia, business, civil society, and so much more. Dear graduates, our world is in turmoil. Our economies are in free fall. People are scared, they're grieving, they're anxious. The COVID-19 pandemic is causing enormous suffering, and the measures to contain and overcome it are testing societies to breaking point. This is above all a human crisis that is affecting everyone, everywhere. We are in uncharted waters as people struggle to deal with grief, job losses, anxiety, and uncertainty about the future. COVID-19 is exacerbating the inequalities that were already starting to strain our social contract. Its worst impact is on the poor, the marginalized, and those targeted for discrimination, especially women, people living with disabilities, migrants and refugees. The responses must match the scale of the crisis and must be based on unity and solidarity. The United Nations is at the forefront. The World Health Organization is leading the global health response, and the entire United Nations system is mobilized to support governments at the country level in saving lives, protecting people, and restoring jobs and livelihoods. A global system of air links is transporting medical supplies and equipment to some 120 countries across the world, ramping up to 700 flights each month. We are working with governments and international financial institutions to help countries manage the immediate social and economic devastation, providing guidance for our global efforts and putting our supply chains at the world's disposal. Here in New York, we are convening intergovernmental meetings on the crisis and mobilizing around a series of policy briefs with concrete recommendations to governments, civil society, and leaders of all kinds everywhere. These briefs focus on how we can mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups and how the pandemic will interact with other global challenges. Through them, we're lifting up voices that are too rarely heard. We are focusing on people with disabilities, people on the front lines of the health response. We are determined that those who are marginalized or isolated are involved in responding to this crisis. We are also thinking about its long-term impact. Returning to our previous path is certainly not an option. Everything we do during and after this pandemic must focus on recovering more equal, sustainable, and resilient pathways that enable us not only to beat COVID, but to tackle the climate crisis and address the root causes of poverty, inequality, and hunger. Dear graduates, the class of 2020 is really special. You're the right people in the right place at the right time. You have the ideas, the energy, the tools, the skills, the strength of character, and the opportunity to help the world recover better. You have the courage of your convictions. And so you give me hope. You give us all hope. And we at the United Nations, I can tell you, are the global custodians of hope. There are solutions all around us. Solutions to the climate crisis, from clean electricity, clean electric transport, and low-emission urban development, to investments in resilient infrastructure and large-scale nature and biodiversity conservation. Inclusive solutions that address discriminations and inequality of all kinds. Now we have an opportunity to connect those solutions and to implement them at the scale needed to tackle global problems. Solidarity, collectivity, and interactivity should be our guide. As you step forward today, the first day of the rest of your lives, I hope you will think about these new challenges and opportunities. Business as usual is over. The status quo is over. The question is, what will replace it? And that, above all, is up to you. From where you are today, the future may look particularly uncertain. But fear not, if you want to make a difference, you will find a way. One of my favorite quotes, and I use it every day, is from Nelson Mandela Madiba. And he said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." Dear students, I will end with some advice to you, humble advice, as you embark on the next phase of your lives. First, get ready for the journey ahead. Ask yourselves how you can prepare, both physically and mentally, for the future. And on your way, make each experience, each mile of your journey count. The skills and experiences you gain today are treasure in the bank for the future. Prepare yourselves for adversity. There are always bumps in the road, or as I say in Nigeria, potholes. They will prepare you to take on even greater challenges, to raise your ambition, to become compassionate, empathetic leaders and people. And when you fall, you'll need a safety net. And that, my friends, will be your family and your friends. Stay close to them, invest time and energy in them, because they are your shock absorbers and you are theirs. We all belong to each other in this world. Don't be afraid to use your voice, your heart, your head to make a difference. You're all in a privileged position as graduates of Fletcher. You're all incredible people who have worked really hard to get to this point. Now I hope you can make it count. And as Gandhi once said, be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you, and good luck.
It has been so hard not to be together these last few weeks, but we are so proud of all of you and we hold you in our hearts. At the school's founding in 1933, as the country emerged from the Great Depression, Dean Halford Hoskins observed that there is an expectation that our work will be of an unusually significant nature. The faculty and I have no doubt that this class will live up to that expectation, as have the classes before you. At the beginning of this ceremony, I spoke of the challenge of building back trustworthiness into our societies, between peoples and countries. That process starts with leaders who are trustworthy. You are trustworthy. Continue to lead with your heart and head together, just as those of you who volunteered and our military fellows showed us in the last few weeks. Understand the power of reciprocal vulnerability, that in the authentic response of, I don't know, we don't know, you are building trust. Keep on holding the long view. Focus on that point on the distant horizon where we see the better world, while you pivot to manage short-term challenges and opportunities. As you embark on your careers around the world and work to make it a more peaceful, prosperous, cleaner and fairer place, on behalf of the faculty and staff of the Fletcher School, congratulations. Once again, we wish you well. We will watch with pride your contributions, and please know that Fletcher is a place to return to again and again to top up your resilience as and when you need to. Embrace this moment, including all of its uncertainty. In the words of Mary Oliver, it is a serious thing just to be alive on this fresh morning in this broken world. Class of 2020, go heal our world.